By international relations expert Dr. Emmanuel Navon. Dr. Navon, it's always a pleasure to have you in studio. Donald Trump is not holding back. Take us through the message he is giving to the Jewish community in America, in Israel, and voters as well.
Look, traditionally and historically, most Jews were voting Democrat, and we're seeing changes in the Democratic Party, and Donald Trump is trying to convince most Jews to leave the Democrats. We know that most Jews did not vote for Donald Trump, and I think what he's trying to do is really to convince the Jews to quit the Democrats and vote for him instead. Don't forget that there are going to be presidential elections in less than 2 years. But it doesn't look like this is going to fly and convince most Jews in America, definitely liberal Jews who really do not like Donald Trump and are not going to switch their allegiance just because of anti-Semitic comments by some new representatives in Congress. So I don't think this is going to work, but what he's trying to do really is to try and convince the Jews to switch to him because of those anti-Semitic statements. But it's not a widespread phenomenon in the Democratic Party, as opposed, for example, to the Labour Party in England. It's not that the Democratic Party has really turned mostly anti-Semitic. So I don't think it's fair to compare what's going on in the Democratic Party today and, let's say, the Labour Party in Britain. So I don't think this attempt by Donald Trump is really going to be successful.
And this attempt, as you call it, to divide voters on this issue, how would you imagine the Democrats would respond to the latest comments that he's made?
Look, Donald Trump, his constitutional basis his voting basis comes more from the evangelists, much more than from the Jews. So the Jews today feel very, I guess, uncomfortable with some statements made by new representatives, such as Representative Omar and others. But as I said before, unless it becomes a widespread phenomenon, and unless the candidate for the presidency in the Democratic Party turns out to be, anti-Israel or supporting boycott or this kind of things, I do not see a massive switch of allegiance for American Jews from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, especially as long as Donald Trump is the candidate for the Republican, because he's a very divisive figure, and most Jews in America do not want him as a president. So you would really need to have a very divisive figure in the Democratic Party as a candidate, a very radical candidate, and a different candidate in the Republican Party to see such a migration of votes, I would say, from the Jews in America, from the Democrats to the Republicans.
Talking about the Democrats and the contenders coming through in the party, the newest poll showing former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders leading the field among likely Democratic voters. Now, of course, it's early days, but your sense of the kind of candidates that are coming through as top contenders with the Democrats?
I think when we look at their respective ages, over 75 or something, I think are two of them. People can Google it and double check exactly how old they are, but it's like in the late 70s. And it says something about the Democratic Party. You have the younger candidates, some of them are pretty radical by the standards of the Democratic Party. Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are very much, I would say, politicians from the past, and they're still trying. But when it comes to Joe Biden, he's a moderate. Sanders is not, obviously. But Sanders, when he ran last time against Hillary Clinton, his agenda at the time was considered very radical. He called himself a socialist. And today, most young contenders for the Democratic Party are also openly socialist, which is something very unusual in American politics, to have Democratic candidates and politicians calling themselves socialists. I would say this can be credited to Bernie Sanders. But now, for Bernie Sanders to run on this radical economic platform, radical by American standards, because by European standards it would not be considered radical. He doesn't really have any added value or anything that makes him different from other younger candidates who also have pretty radical platforms when it comes to the economy.
I want to move on now to North Korea and parliamentary voting, which happened on Sunday.